I do strongly believe that if we leverage AI in the right ways, we can accelerate the impact that as members of a people team we can give. And so it's like learn from engineers, learn from anyone who is an expert in building GPTs, understanding how it works. I think there is power in becoming an expert there to be more people on the people side.
They keep telling us that it's all over for HR. The age of AI is upon us, and that means HR should be prepared to be decimated. We reject that message. The future of HR won't be handed to us. Instead, it'll be defined by those ready to experiment, adopt, and adapt. Future Proof HR invites these builders to share what they're trying, how it's going, what they've learned, and what's next. We are committed to arming HR with the AI insights to not just survive, but to thrive. Hello and welcome to the Future Proof HR podcast, where we explore how forward-thinking people leaders are reimagining work and leadership in the age of AI. I'm your host, Thomas Kunjappu, CEO of Cleary. Today's guest is Lorena Scott, Chief People Officer and Head of Customer Experience at Relay, a leader who's redefined what it means to connect employees and customers alike. Lorena's background spans venture investing, founding an e-commerce business, and scaling people and CX teams at companies like 500px, Algolia, Caseware, and Ritual. At Relay, she's leading both people and culture and customer experience and uniting two disciplines around one philosophy, creating environments where people do the best work of their lives. Lorena, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Right off the bat, I have to ask you about this dual mandate. Tell me about this combo, these two hats that you wear between people and customer experience.
I know for most people, it feels like it's an awkward combination or unique, but it is very on brand for Relay in that we've always prided ourselves in providing a very human-centric experience. And that because it is so important to us, it really meant that having a unified experience, really showing up consistently in moments that matter, whether it be our external customers, our small business owners, or our internal customers, our relayers, we needed one leader to really ensure that the values and the way we did that and executed against that was consistent and unique and meaningful. And so, as I look at kind of what's the equation for success in really delivering incredible experiences, it's like how you onboard, it's how you support, and it's how you enable. And we leverage maybe different pieces to that formula, whether it's people or customer experience, but it is very, very Relay-esque, and that's very special for us.
I know you've had experience on different sides of the table, right? And investing, founding, being obviously on the people team. I'm curious, what draws you to continue to be on the people side?
The honest answer is I stumbled into people about 10 years ago. I had a business that I started on the e-commerce side, which you mentioned in the intro. It was an epic failure. It did not scale as an org. So I was a founder that had to basically shut down my business. But I knew that I didn't want to go back into finance and investing. That's not where my heart was taking me. And so I was fortunate enough to have befriended a former investor who turned into a CEO. He needed someone to help very broadly across a startup named 500px. And so hey, can you help me run finance and customer support and operations and people? And candidly, across all of those disciplines, I really only knew how to run a model or knew that well with confidence. But he took a bet on me and he said, go figure it out. I think you'll care enough. And you've had enough failures that you should have learned a thing or two. And I found myself very much gravitating to the people work. And so the short answer is I find it really interesting. It's never the same. It is a constant journey in terms of learning about people, about what matters to them, about building programs and experiences that are that show up with a lot of heart and care. And I find that really rewarding, more so than living in the financial model these days.
Got it. So then, do you think there are lots of differences between being a chief people officer and a founder, but is there anything in mindset or are there any similarities that you carried through?
Yeah, I think there are a few. One is just resilience. right? Being a founder, and I didn't have a co-founder. I think in that context also requires just a lot of rolling up your sleeves, doing the work, having an appreciation for what it takes to do the work, and a lot of creativity and problem solving. And today, there is no shortage of work to be done as we're scaling a company, and in my kind of role of leading people and culture and in that context. And so it's being ruthless about prioritizing, knowing that resources aren't unlimited, and not applying the same playbook that other organizations have used so that relay feels differentiated from an employee experience. And so there's a lot of creativity, a lot of problem solving, and you're always on and working on, I think. And I love that. That fuels me. It's not for everyone, but for me, I take a lot of joy in doing the work and the amount of work. I know that sounds like a little crazy, but yeah.
There's no shortage of that, of the amount of work, just on the people side, but also obviously on the customer experience side. And I think in this moment, especially when there is a proliferation of AI, um, uh, I'm curious, are you seeing more adoption or possibilities in one of your orgs versus the other? Or just in general, could you talk us through a little bit about how you're seeing at this moment AI is getting into or impacting the way that you and your team is doing work?
I would say we are leveraging or thinking about AI equally between the two teams. I mentioned earlier a little bit about the equation for success being really, how do you onboard successfully? How do you support and enable? And so both teams have really strong onboarding practices and rituals. Both do a lot around enablement, whether it's CX enablement or what we call talent enablement on the people team, and we're doing a lot of support or kind of firefighting internally or externally. So we're trying to find opportunities where AI can drive efficiencies or speed up our opportunities to do enablement, either at scale or refine or improve the enablement.
Mhm.
And so it is balanced. And sometimes, I'll find myself something that has worked really well in CX and thinking about whether or not we could translate that to accelerating some of the work we're doing on the people side and vice versa. So balance and also inspiring, kind of both sides of how we leverage AI on both sides teams.
Oh, that's really interesting. Do any examples like come to mind? Because most listeners are in the people discipline itself, and of course, you're inspired by just what other folks you're seeing within your own discipline, but also you're being exposed a little bit to what's going on, but not at your level in terms of just like in-depth ownership. Anything come to mind, especially in terms of inspiration that people leaders can take from things that are working on the CX side? And by the way, also counterexamples are great too if there's anything that, didn't work or it's actually different.
Well, I had a prep conversation where we talked about AI coaching. We've actually been using AI to coach and QA our CX agents for maybe the second half of 2025. And we've seen improvements in confidence levels and CSAT scores, what we call acceleration of one touch resolution. So being able to answer a ticket or a question from a customer in one setting versus kind of multiple interactions.
Mhm.
And so we learned from that to say, how do we accelerate just enablement or coaching within our own team internally? It's different tools, different partnerships potentially, but nonetheless, we saw the impact in ultimately like the customer experience by way of a CSAT score. And so how do we do that more quickly on the people side, whether it's on general like support questions where we get with like inquiries like how's my payroll or what's the next payroll cycle or how do my benefits work, to things like, hey, I'm really struggling in this moment and giving feedback. How do I do it better? How do I do it differently?
Let's talk about that second element because that could be not just for the HR team, but actually more broadly for peer-to-peer feedback or I think crucially manager feedback. The AI powered coaching, it sounds like it started with helping customer support agents in doing their work. Have you thought about that for managers as well?
Yeah, so right now we're exploring. So, a bit about Relay is that we do have a talent enablement practice that focuses on kind of 3 points in the journey. One is our onboarding, the other is what we call growing, so growing in your career. And the third is a leadership development path, and how we support developing leaders and accelerating our leaders at Relay. And a big part, a tool that we have in our toolkit across those three areas is coaching. But for like hiring coaches that kind of fit in the Relay context and also in our budget, because we are a scale up, has been challenging. And so coaching has really been limited up until recently to our people leaders or our managers. And we are working with a partner right now on AI coaching for everyone. So that for people leaders who have not yet had one-to-one coaching opportunities, but are struggling to structure a conversation that is both candid and caring, right? Like they're first-time managers, they've never done this before. They want like a micro moment of coaching that an AI coach can do that for them, to an individual contributor who is structuring how to like present or communicate effectively the point that they want to make because they see an opportunity that needs to be addressed, but they haven't quite been able to crystallize the comment in a way that is being heard. There's many different use cases, but we've loaded this to have our values, our roadmap, our priorities, all of the Relay intel to really refine how it speaks and the type of feedback it gives.
So it is personalized to the organization, and further, you're building in capacity. So I love these examples of AI unlocking just new surface area that just what would never have happened before. And I think before when we are talking, you mentioned you're less interested in AI replacing roles. I'm just, okay, let me have AI do this instead of a person, and more about accelerating, and what you can't do otherwise or what can scale today. How do you think about that as a lens for investment in just AI projects across the board?
Yeah, I know when you and I talked earlier, I was like, I believe in the power of people. It's part of why I have the two roles that I have. But I also work in a resource constrained environment. And so we can't do everything. And one of the really wonderful exercises that we did in September of this year was to dream a little bit. What would it take to make Relay a generational company? And what do we want to be known for, both on the people and customer experience side? And so there were all these wonderful, ambitious dreams that we put on the table. And then given where we're at and the pace that we're moving, I was like, we won't be able to do those next year. It's going to be like a 2027, 2028 dream. And then I thought, what if we leverage technology to accelerate or bring forward those plans into the 2026 roadmap? And so that's been really powerful in that we've now move forward things that we wanted to do because we can leverage AI or just leverage other technology and do it sooner, do it better, be continuously learning. That to me is we wouldn't have been able to have coaching for all until I think 2027. And that had to mean a lot of other things went right for us. And now we're going to do it by the end of this year.
Wow, that's like a 2-year head start. So then to enable all of this, you're having these internal discussions with teams who themselves, like, in CX and people teams, they also have this, like many knowledge workers, this background fear, right, around what's coming with AI. It's coming for my jobs. Have you faced that? Maybe you haven't faced that and different teams are different, and how do you kind of combat and kind of shift from this kind of fear to excitement for bringing in your roadmap and being able to do more things faster?
I honestly have not seen the fear, or maybe folks haven't expressed it to me as transparently. I think in general to combat that, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And so if the hypothesis is, or if we're leading with, it's going to accelerate investment in roadmap or in initiatives by 12 to 18 months or as much as 20 to 24 months, then we just have to show that's happening. If we're going to remove some of the tedious tasks that were on your plate so that you can do more impactful work, we have to demonstrate that. And then on the CX side, for example, we're like, we want to make you more confident in your work so you can show it better for our customers. We have to unlock that and demonstrate that and show the data and how that's happening. And so long as you can prove out what you're saying in action and that translates into the business impact, I think that's where you build the credibility. I think maybe folks are by nature a little should be a little nervous, but ultimately, if you do what you say in terms of how AI can be powerful in an org, that speaks volumes. And I feel like that's being seen today, at least in the Relay context.
It's really about showing, right? And is what I'm hearing. Right? So you're like
Doing it
doing,
versus
yes.
saying, yeah.
So speaking of doing, I know you have all types of internal innovations. One of the things that we're talking about is this like listing this internal marketplace, right? Because let's talk a little bit about like internal mobility, because we've been talking about how AI projects have been coming into the fore at Relay, but on top of that, there's new skill sets that need to be developed, and there's new potential like projects. Let's talk a little bit about how you're enabling all of that, like creating these internal marketplaces. I think you call it, right, between to pair talent or learning projects with or learning goals with potential projects within the organization.
First of all, I really can't take credit for this initiative. This was the creative like brainchild of a member of the people team. So hopefully she'll listen to this and know that shout out to Jenna. But one of the things that we're saying, if AI unlocks more efficiency and therefore gives our team members more space to do projects or special projects, let's say that's 20% of their time, what is the mechanism that we're going to build to create a platform for people to figure out what those stretch opportunities or those special projects are as we scale? Because informally, that has happened at Relay for the last 6 years. Somebody in marketing will be like, I have this problem around this data that I'm trying to better understand. And somebody from the data team will be like, I will help you with that. And it's a beautiful exchange. It's a great partnership. But as our teams have gotten larger, as Relay has gotten bigger and more distributed, that doesn't happen as naturally. And so what can we put formally in place? And so this is the marketplace idea that we have. It's not yet launched or built out. Is how do we create a destination within Relay for folks to talk about their skills, things they want to learn, places where they want to kind of grow in their career, and match that with projects or skilled needs on other teams. Because ultimately the way people do progress at Relay is delivering on impact and taking on stretch opportunities that allow for that impact. And so now we're just creating something more formal to allow that. But the only way that would be possible is that if we afforded people more time to take on those opportunities. And that's where AI has been like, it's a partnership between like, we've created more efficiency in the system. Therefore, there's incremental more time to take on these stretch opportunities. How do we find and match people to these opportunities?
So I think you're saying the AI element of that is to kind of take away some of the activities that you're doing today to be able to have some open time to stretch into new areas. And on the other hand, I think there's opportunities that will be enabled by AI, which will be the stretch opportunities as well. And effectively, in this endeavor to create a two-sided marketplace, there's supply and demand. So we talked about a little bit of, I think, how AI's potentially, for a lot of it, producing both the supply and demand, right, for new skills proliferating throughout the organization. But on the demand side, managers or leaders or project leaders who are potentially looking for talent, are there things that you're doing systematically to encourage, not necessarily the internal marketplace itself, but just encourage either AI use or new project initiatives to then call out the needs, which would then feed into the extended path? Because the reason I ask this is often, I think surprisingly, in high talent density environments, it's the supply of opportunity that's more constraining than the supply of opportunity versus the demand of people wanting to do stuff. So how do you ensure that there's like a system that's generating these stretch opportunities consistently for people?
Candidly, that has not been a problem at Relay, right? We have no shortage of projects and opportunities. What I do worry about is people being burnt out because they're trying to do a lot of things on the side of their desk because they're curious and because they want to show up for their team members. I think what I wanted to do was make sure that we created the space, right? There was a way to relieve some of the manual tasks from folks, as an example, so that they could spend a portion of their time picking up projects without breaking. and being able to really sustain the ride for as long as they want to be a part of Relay. So we haven't necessarily yet. And look, we're a 225 going to 300 person company. And so maybe that's the luxury of still being small and or on the smaller side. But today, projects and initiatives where folks could learn and explore is not the
Constraint. This has been a fantastic conversation so far. If you haven't already done so, make sure to join our community. We're building a network of the most forward-thinking HR and people operations professionals who are defining the future. I will personally be sharing news and ideas around how we can all thrive in the age of AI. You can find it at gocleary.com/Cleary-community. Now back to the show.
constraint.
Maybe I can
It's,
ask a
it's
little bit
people's
different.
time.
Maybe I can
Yeah.
ask it a little bit different, and maybe it is a scaling thing. It really at scale is when it comes in. It's everyone for whatever work they're doing. There's always more to do than there's time for, but often what is missing is the connection between that and the potential for culturally, or for even a manager to ask the question that like someone in a completely different org would be able to help. Or headcount or the team that I have that's the resourcing and my time, and that's often what maybe that's like to me that's a supply of ideas problem, but really it's a cultural issue about making sure that there's this even the idea that an HR generalist could help with a marketing data analytics project or vice versa. And because as you get a little bit more siloed, I guess that's part of what you're looking to do, right? Kind of create these
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah. And that had happened, as I alluded, informally. And when we were in just one office, it happened naturally. We are now we're doing the count, 1, 2, 3 primary offices. We're much larger. And so though that, hey, we run into each other in main office in Toronto doesn't happen. And I also found that like the same people who knew each other well were turning to each other to do these projects together. When there's a lot of amazing folks, some of them much newer to the Relay journey, who had the appetite, the skills, and just didn't have the connections. And building this marketplace means that there's an equalizing of, if I have the skill, I have the bandwidth, and there's this opportunity presented, I can raise my hand and do it and learn and really drive impact.
Yeah, so the multi-location problem starts created, and then the hierarchical organization at scale starts to reinforce it, and you're already fighting against that early. But then let's talk about the constraint then. So besides the skill set, it's time. There's lots of opportunities to bring back time for the team, specifically on the HR side. I know you're doing some interesting stuff also with CX agents as innovators, creating their own GPTs and stuff. But on the HR side or on the people team side, what are the big opportunities that you see that would, looking forward, or even to your point, maybe it's this quarter, not 2 years from now, what are the big opportunities that are unlocked that can get people out of, let's say, some of the proverbial muck, right? The work muck.
Yeah. I think getting people out of the proverbial, like, let me pull your vacation balances, let me share more on the benefits, which takes time and it's important to people, is like the easy, low hanging fruit. What I'm also seeing now is that we're able to create dashboards at the company level and then at the team level that give us signal on, this moment happened, here's where it could turn into a good like trajectory versus an exit. So we're feeding information into, we're basically downloading reports and feeding it into ChatGPT and helping us better understand the signal and then translating that back to managers and leaders. And that could we could do that, and we have been able to do that, but this just accelerates the time to deliver these dashboards, to deliver the insights and the opportunity to go deeper, because it's less about report pulling and data amalgamation and more around, what does this mean? How do I unpack this? So I think the insights are better and we're able to action more quickly, and then learn as a result faster.
I love that. So so I guess you've mentioned like two specific opportunities, one around just, I guess, the reactive HR support work. And then just, I would say this is really about analysis, right? Because I think you're talking about particular analysis around employee engagement data, but there's probably different pockets of that type of work in like your HR professionals world, right? Compensation or one-off requests for analysis for a particular organization or VP, but that intermediate step of data analysis to get to insights can be made more efficient.
Mhm. Yeah. And right now we're resource constrained, so we only have one person on the people operations team, as an example, and the level of analysis and kind of the depth of thinking would normally be limited by that one human.
So let's talk about yet another process, which I think is interesting, headcount planning. Yeah, so you said that your capacity model now includes both humans and non-humans. Tell me more.
That is primarily on the CX side today as we are building out our 2026 plan, for example. Normally, past models, capacity models, and what we went to finance to request for additional headcount was based on the channels that we supported our customers and like the growth of those channels based on ticket volume and kind of information that we had in the current year. We have totally changed our model to think about what are the human actions and what are the non-human touches that will still deliver a great experience. And so I have a headcount need for both human agents as well as our non-human agents. And then I'm able to, as our assumptions, for example, on efficiency and quality shift over the course of the year, better understand what is the mix between our human and our AI agent.
Okay, so I have to ask here because this is the kind of language that is great for like vendors who are trying to like, or if you're trying to get clicks in the media landscape to talk about like workforce planning with agents and robots replacing humans. But here, Lauren, an operator working with your finance team, and you found this to be like practically useful. How is this, from your perspective, any different than software? Like you might ask for headcount and software budget to work on stuff like in the past, versus now AI agents and like human agents. Does it feel a little bit different in the conversation that you're putting forward with finance than those times?
It's a yes, it does feel different in that I think with software requests in terms of budget for tooling in the past, it's been more about the cost saving, and what leverage does it give us from a financial perspective for the work. So reduced cost per interaction if we're using this tool is one example on the customer experience side. Whereas and rightfully or wrongfully, I know about 60 to 70% of our CSAT score is just driven by timeliness of response, or even the quality of the responses. If we can get to a customer in less than 10 minutes, that they will be way more engaged as a result, be a higher C score, higher NPS, and higher revenue for Relay because they'll stay with us. And so now I'm saying an AI agent will be on 24/7 and will give responses within 60 seconds. That is more about revenue and customer experience than it is about efficiency of like how do I reduce my cost to serve this customer. And so I think that's how it has changed, at least how we talk about what are the outcomes for the business as a result of using an AI agent versus a human agent that can only work so many hours, sometimes has to be retaught things. And so that's how it's shifted for us.
That's interesting. That reminds me of what the earlier conversation we were having around coaching, and where it's increasing the capacity to create value, right? So your research. So let's follow the thought experiment on both sides. So on the coaching side, you could have coaches at an hourly rate giving on demand 24/7 coverage for everyone in the entire organization. And that's one way to get at it, but that's just like the cost like doesn't add up. And same thing here, you could have, as the organization scales up, you could scale up your human workforce so that you have within 10-minute touch point 24/7 for every single interaction, but that also doesn't scale, right? So in this case, it's actually this other investment that you're doing versus headcount to actually get to those outcomes directly, right? So it's contributing to the outcome versus and actually increasing the capacity. Otherwise, with software, you might be, or traditional software, SaaS, you might be asking, given the headcount we have, how can we make them more productive? And I think, did I kind of summarize that nuance? I think it's very, Very interesting.
Yes. And the only thing I would add is that on the human level, whether you're talking about CX or on the people side, sometimes we require a lot of re-education or we'll fall into bad practices. And so one of the benefits of the CX agent, AI agent, is that it's constantly learning and it doesn't forget the things that we have trained or taught it on. And so where we have to see this play out, but there is at least a thinking that we have that ultimately the quality of the conversation could be even better depending on the issue because they're constantly learning and getting better versus maybe forgetting things as humans
I
naturally
see.
do.
Yeah, this is so I have to circle back all the way to the initial comment. So then do AI agents then ultimately replace human jobs in this world as we kind of keep shifting towards them like adding more value, like expanding the scope of value that you can add for an organization and potentially in certain vectors doing it better?
I think it depends on the job to be done. When I look at the types of tickets or types of issues that come up for our customers, they're not all solvable by an AI agent. And then when we're talking about people's money and payroll and issues, like there are moments that really matter where a human is required. And we just want to be able to divert the resources that we have today to be there in those moments versus being jammed up with things that are less impactful to a business, less impactful to the relationship that we have with a customer. And that's the same can be true on the people side. It's not that I want a leaner people team. I just want them to be there in the moments that really matter and do so in a more impactful way.
That is really well put. So let's talk a little bit about the future then, Lorena. So let's say you're looking 2 years ahead. What does uh, I don't know, a people plus CX organization look like in an AI enabled organization? You're already well down this path. What maybe, yeah, what does it like team look like? Especially what skill sets are like really like helpful? Do new titles emerge and or yeah, how does just the day to day look like?
Well, I'm not a very good fortune teller or I don't know, I get crystal ball. I'm laughing because 2 years ago, well, not 2.5 years ago, when I joined Relays, you would have told me how much time I would spend in ChatGPT. I would have told you were crazy, but that's my reality now. So I've embraced
Mm.
this world that we're living in and find it really interesting. To answer your question, I think it has already changed how we think about hiring. And from an org design perspective, I think it is creating roles where having this AI expertise is more and more important. And so if I even look at like my 2026 headcount plan for both CX and people, I don't even know what our role that's just focused on, are we using the right tools? Are we embedding the practices? Are we measuring if people are using the Zendesk Copilot or the AI coaching agent, just making sure that sort of all of that is happening. So I think it is creating new roles where that is a very much a core focus. And beyond that, I'm not gonna give you a good answer, Thomas. I don't know.
But it's fair to
Yeah.
call out what was happening 2 years ago, and could I have predicted where I am at this moment back then? And it feels like we are accelerating ever further. So maybe caution is warranted. But that said, people are developing new skills and need to stay relevant, and we're all about future proofing, folks. So if you had to give advice, and maybe there's the simplest way to someone who's just coming out of college or just new into the workplace and is interested in getting into the people function, what thoughts would you have for them besides that you don't have a crystal ball?
I would say lead it. Like, it does feel a little counter to what we do to be so focused on AI when we're committed to delivering these incredible human experiences and all about the people. But I do strongly believe that if we leverage AI in the right ways, we can accelerate the impact that as members of a people team we can give and learn from engineers, learn from anyone who is an expert in building GPTs, understanding how it works. Like, I think there is power in becoming an expert there to be more impactful on the people side. And I see that today on my team. Like I'm part of the least sophisticated, the least knowledgeable. I'm like, always impressed by the GPTs that our people team are building from hiring to the retention side. And so I'm like, don't be afraid of it and ask a lot of questions, experiment on the side. That's what I do is build and then tweak. And I used it for board work with last board session and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Love it. So thank you so much for this conversation, Lorna, and looking ahead a little bit as well. If you're, as we close out here, let me just ask you, are there any particular projects, ideas that as you look forward that you're particularly passionate about or excited about seeing how it's going to turn out over the next year or so?
I'm excited, even though I didn't have good answers to you on what the future org design and the roles that can come out of this new world that we're operating in. I'm super pumped for the AI coaching that we talked about, and then looking at our vision and our these projects that we hoped to bring 2 years from now, and how we can bring them in fast forward. So there's I think to having the space and the time to dream and then saying, how do we leverage technology, AI to bring those forward on both CX and people? It's not very specific, but that's like the body work I'm committed to doing over the next 2 months is dreaming and then figuring out how to harness how far we've come in the last couple of years to also bring all those projects forward in a scalable way. So I like to dream and I'm looking forward to doing that.
I love that. Thank you for dreaming and sharing some of those dreams with us here on this conversation. And I particularly like this idea of basically expanding scope, accelerating and scaling up things that you otherwise, even maybe in your initial dream, would think of with your initial formulas of how you might get to this outcome. You think it's way out there, but actually there's opportunities that you can grab much faster. And thank you for going through some of these and going back and forth between the CX and HR examples, because I do feel like there's a lot of adoption in many other functions, broadly speaking, besides the HR and people function, where there's so much inspiration that we can take in. And also, it's important to understand about, because if we're creating leverage in the workplace, it's through the people. And so we need to really understand how each of these different functions are shifting as well. So thank you again for the conversation, Lorena, and for everyone else who's out there and looking to future proof your own orgs and your own HR and people teams. I hope you took some interesting nuggets out of this one. Best of luck, and we'll be seeing you. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Future Proof HR. If you like the discussion, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on the platform you're listening to or watching us on. Or share this with a friend or colleague who may find value in the message. See you next time as we keep our pulse on how we can all thrive in the age of AI. Hey, it's Thomas again. One quick question before you go. Are you and your HR team tired of answering the same employee questions again and again in Slack? If yes, our Cleary AI-powered Slack bot is here to help. It takes routine employee requests and answers it automatically while freeing up time for you to take on more important tasks. At the same time, it automatically builds up an HR knowledge base as you go. It's quick to set up, works right in Slack, and you can try it for free. Just head on over to gocleary.com/HR-chatbot to install it. It's again, gocleary.com/HR-chatbot. Thanks again.